Picture this. You're on the open ocean. A huge, unforgiving expanse of gray water stretches out in every direction. There's no land in sight. No GPS, no map, not even a compass to point you home. For most of human history, a trip like this was basically a one-way ticket to getting lost forever. And yet, one culture didn't just survive this. They mastered it. The Vikings. In their iconic longships, they crossed thousands of miles of the treacherous North Atlantic, connecting continents and completely changing the course of history. They were raiders, traders, and explorers who sailed from Scandinavia to Iceland, Greenland, and even the shores of North America, centuries before Columbus ever set sail. So, how on earth did they do it? How did they look out at that endless ocean and actually find their way? In this video, we're exploring the lost toolkit of the Viking navigator. It wasn't one single magical device, but a whole system of clever observations and ingenious, low-tech tools. We'll look at everything from a simple wooden disc that followed the sun, to a legendary crystal that could find light on even the darkest days. Before we get to their amazing tools, you have to understand the Viking mindset. These weren't just sailors. They were master observers, people who lived and breathed the rhythms of the natural world. Their first, most basic strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Follow the coast. For a lot of their journeys, especially early on, Viking longships would practice what's called coastal hugging. They used the land itself as a giant unfolding map. A weirdly shaped cliff, a big fjord, or a cluster of islands became visual cues, passed down through stories and sagas from one generation of sailors to the next. The sagas, the epic poems of the Norse world, weren't just adventure stories. They were filled with navigational lore and descriptions of routes. They might describe sailing west from a certain point, keeping a particular set of islands on the horizon. This kind of knowledge was crucial, but this method had its limits. The Vikings were ambitious. They didn't want to just skim the edges of the world. They wanted to cross the vast, open water to find new lands for settlement and trade. And to do that, they had to leave the coastline behind and trust in a totally different set of guides. Once out on the open ocean, the most reliable guide was the sun. The Vikings knew, like all ancient people, that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. But you can't cross an ocean by just guessing the time of day. They needed something more precise. They needed an instrument. Their solution was likely a device known as a sun compass or shadow board. And in 1948, archaeologists in Greenland made a discovery that brought this idea to life. In the ruins of an 11th century convent, they found a fragment of a small wooden disc, just 7 centimeters across. At first, people thought it was just a decoration, but a closer look showed deliberately carved lines and notches. This is the Unartok disc, and it's our best physical evidence for a Viking sun compass. Here's the theory on how it worked. A central pin, or gnomon, would be placed in the hole at the center. As the sun moved, the tip of the gnomon's shadow would trace a path across the disc. The Vikings would have pre-carved curves on the disc, showing the sun's path for different seasons. To find north, a navigator would just place the disc flat, pop in the pin, and turn it until the tip of the shadow touched the right line for that time of year. The markings would then point to the cardinal directions. It was like a medieval GPS powered by the sun. But it's important to remember this is still a reconstruction. The exact function is debated. Some hypotheses even suggest that certain marks might have been used to calculate latitude, but this is not an established fact. The sun compass was a game changer, but it had one huge weakness. What happened when the sun disappeared behind the thick clouds of the North Atlantic? The sun isn't always out, and journeys didn't stop for sunset. For night navigation, the Vikings turned to the stars. The sky was their celestial map. In the northern hemisphere, one star stays almost fixed in the sky, Polaris, the North Star. By finding Polaris, which they called the leading star. A Viking navigator had a constant anchor point for north. It wasn't perfectly aligned with true north back then, so it required some skilled correction. But it was still an invaluable guide. They would also use the rising and setting of bright constellations to hold a steady course. This knowledge wasn't in complicated star charts. It was all stored in memory and passed down orally. A seasoned navigator would know the night sky inside and out. But what tied all this together was a skill called dead reckoning. Dead reckoning is the art of navigating by calculation, a mental map every sailor kept in their head. Starting from their last known position, a navigator would estimate their current spot based on three things: their course, their speed, and how much time had passed. Speed was often judged by pure experience, the feel of water on the hull, the sound of wind in the sail. Time might have been measured with simple methods, but tools like the sandglass aren't archaeologically confirmed for the Viking Age. This process was prone to error. An unexpected current or a shift in the wind could throw a ship miles off course. So, this internal compass had to be constantly checked against the real world. Even without a clear view of the sun or stars, the Vikings were far from blind. They learned to read the environment with a skill born from generations of experience. One of their most famous techniques involved birds. The sagas tell of the explorer Floki Vilgerharson, nicknamed Raven Floki, who reportedly used ravens to find Iceland. He released 3. The first flew back where he came from. The second landed on the ship, but the third flew northwest, leading him right to land. Beyond legends, they also watched coastal seabirds, whose morning and evening flight paths could point the way to an unseen coast. They also read the water. An experienced sailor could feel the direction of deep ocean swells. When these long rolling waves hit a large landmass, they'd get blocked or reflected, creating a different, more confused sea state that signaled land was near. They also had a practical knowledge of the great ocean currents and seasonal winds, using them like invisible highways. As they got closer, other clues would appear. A specific type of cloud bank often forms over land. It's also plausible they looked for land glow on the underside of clouds at night, reflecting light from large ice sheets in places like Greenland. And for a final confirmation, it is likely they used a tool called a lead line, a weighted rope lowered to check the water's depth. The weight might have been filled with tallow or wax to pick up a sample of the seabed sand, gravel, or clay, giving them a fingerprint of the coast to confirm they were near a safe harbor. So what about those truly hopeless days? Days with thick fog or a solid overcast sky, when the sun was gone and the ship was alone in a gray world. This is where the legend of the most mysterious Viking tool comes in, the solarstein, or sunstone. Mentioned in the sagas, the sunstone was described as a crystal that could reveal the sun's position, even when it was completely hidden. For centuries, everyone thought this was just folklore. But in 1967, a Danish archaeologist suggested a scientific explanation. The sunstone was a real mineral called Iceland spar, a transparent crystal common in Scandinavia. Iceland spar has a cool property called birefringence, which splits a single ray of light into two. Because sunlight becomes polarized as it travels through the atmosphere, this crystal can be used to find its source. The theory is that a navigator would hold the crystal up to the sky and rotate it. As they turned it, the two beams of light inside would change in brightness. By finding the exact angle where the beams were equally bright, they could pinpoint the hidden sun's direction with remarkable accuracy. Modern experiments have confirmed this is totally possible. But here's the catch. Despite the sagas and the science, not a single confirmed sunstone has ever been found in a Viking Age archaeological site. The closest we've come is a piece of Iceland spar on a 16th century shipwreck, which suggests later sailors knew the technique, but it's no proof of Viking use. So the sunstone remains a tantalizing puzzle. It's a scientifically plausible tool for a real problem the Vikings faced. Whether it was a standard piece of kit or a rare, legendary instrument is one of the great unsolved mysteries of the Viking Age. So, how did the Vikings conquer the oceans? There was no single secret. No one magical gadget did all the work. Their incredible success came from a resilient and interlocking system of techniques. It was the sun compass on a clear day and the steady North Star on a clear night. It was the constant mental math of dead reckoning, checked and corrected by a deep personal knowledge of the natural world. They read the flight of birds, the patterns of waves, and the look of the clouds. And maybe, just maybe, on the darkest of days, they held a crystal up to the sky, mixing science and saga to find the light. The story of Viking navigation isn't about advanced technology. It's about human ingenuity, a profound connection with the environment, and the courage to sail into the unknown with little more than knowledge, observation, and a few deceptively simple instruments. They didn't just sail the seas. They truly understood them. What do you think is the most impressive part of the Viking navigation toolkit? Was it the clever sun compass, their deep knowledge of nature, or the mysterious sunstone? Let us know in the comments below.